Massachusetts, the heart of America. Prestigious schools, historic streets, the bustling port of Boston. A civilized world, electric lights, and people busy with their modern lives. But just an hour-and-a-half drive south, all of that disappears. In its place is an endless forest, dark green to the point of being terrifying. Ancient oak trees reach out their branches like demonic hands, thick bushes so dense that sunlight can barely penetrate. This is the Freetown Fall River State Forest. The locals call it by another name, one they only dare whisper while the sun is still up: Hockomock Swamp. In the language of the Wampanoag tribe, the first owners of this land, Hockomock has two meanings. The first, place where spirits dwell. The second, far more sinister, spirit of darkness. The Native Americans never stayed here overnight. They came during the day to pray, to offer rituals to their ancestors, and left before the sun touched the treetops. They said that when night falls, the spirits in the swamp awaken, and they are no longer the spirits of Native Americans. They are something older, darker, hungrier. The Europeans came later. They called it Devil's Swamp. They built churches on the edge of the forest, strung up barbed wire, and told their children stories that they themselves could barely believe. Then those stories became true, and the truth never disappears. These are 5 stories of people who entered that forest. Some lived to tell the tale, some did not. And some, though their bodies made it out, their souls remained trapped there in the darkness of Hockomock Swamp. One late autumn evening in 2019, a young photographer named Kevin Walker sat in a small bar in Boston with 3 friends and 5 empty beer glasses in front of him. They were discussing famous haunted locations in New England, and Kevin, a rationalist to the very bone, laughed loudly every time his friends told a ghost story. "You don't believe?" one friend asked. "I believe in science," Kevin replied, raising his 6th beer. "I believe in light, in lenses, in what I can capture with my camera. Ghosts aren't real." His friend smiled, then challenged him. "Then go to Assonet Ledge. In the last 30 years, 7 people have jumped off that cliff. No suicide notes, no signs of depression. They just stood up and walked off. People say that if you go there at midnight, you'll see a woman in a white dress. She floats in midair above the ledge, and she will call to you." Kevin laughed. "I'll go. Not to see a ghost, but to prove there are no ghosts." And he went. Assonet Ledge is not an easy place to find. It lies deep in the Freetown forest, about 2 miles down a dirt trail from the last gravel road. Kevin Walker arrived at 11:47 p.m., his backpack full of equipment: a Canon camera, tripod, flashlight, spare batteries, and a late-night sandwich. The air here was different from the city, colder, wetter, and there was a strange, sharp smell, like mud, but mixed with something that made Kevin's nose wrinkle. The smell of metal, the smell of dried blood. He shook his head, telling himself it was just the swamp, just rotting leaves and decomposing animal carcasses. He climbed up to the ledge, a flat rock that jutted out like a long tongue, with a 60-foot drop below. From here he could see the entire valley, a sea of trees as dark as ink, with only occasional faint lights from distant houses. Kevin set up his camera on the tripod, set it to shoot continuously every 30 seconds. He wanted to capture the fog rising from Hockomock Swamp and rolling across the valley. He played music from his phone, low enough not to disturb the forest's silence, but loud enough to fill the terrifying emptiness. At 1:23 a.m., everything changed. And not suddenly, not with a loud noise. It came slowly, like water seeping through a crack. First, the wind stopped. The trees below suddenly stood still, motionless as statues. Then the crickets stopped chirping. The owls stopped calling. The forest became absolutely silent. A silence so deep that Kevin could hear the blood rushing in his ears. And then he heard it, not from outside, from inside his own head. "So beautiful, isn't it, Kevin?" The voice was a whisper, soft, almost affectionate, like an old lover whispering into a pillow. "Just one more step, just one. I'll hold you." Kevin looked up, and he saw it. About 10 feet from the edge, floating in mid-air, was the shadow of a woman. She wore a tattered white dress, soaking wet as if she had just crawled out of the swamp. Long black hair fell over her face, but her eyes were impossible to hide. They glowed in the darkness, cold and blue, unblinking. They looked at Kevin with a strange familiarity, as if she had known him for a very long time. "Come closer. I promise it won't hurt." Kevin wanted to scream, but his throat was clamped shut. No sound escaped except a weak, raspy groan. And then he realized something far more terrifying than the woman's shadow. His feet were moving toward the edge on their own. Not because he wanted to, not by his own will, but his feet kept moving. 1 step, 2 steps. The distance between him and the edge was now only 3 feet. Kevin fell to his knees, clawing at the rocky ground with his fingernails. His nails broke, blood ran, but he felt no pain. He only felt a horrible urge from deep inside, an urge to stand up, to keep walking, to jump. Just as his body leaned forward, his right foot already off the ground, the camera automatically took a shot. The blinding flash of light exploded into the darkness, shattering the moment. The woman's shadow vanished. The whisper in Kevin's head stopped. He lay face down on the rock, gasping for breath, his whole body trembling like an autumn leaf. His shirt was soaked with sweat. No, not sweat. Water was seeping from the ground, from the cracks in the ledge, soaking into his clothes as if the entire rock was crying. Kevin did not sleep another minute there. He packed up his gear, his hands shaking so badly it took 15 minutes to get the camera off the tripod, and crawled out of the forest at dawn. The sun rose above the treetops, but Kevin still felt cold. A coldness not from the air, but from deep within his bones. 2 days later, Kevin opened his camera's memory card. 247 beautiful photos, nothing unusual. Scenery of the ledge, the valley, the misty fog. No woman's shadow, nothing supernatural, except for the last photo. The photo taken at 1:23 a.m., the exact moment Kevin almost fell. In that photo, Kevin did not see the woman's shadow. He saw himself, standing at the edge of the cliff, arms outstretched, his face twisted into a strange expression, somewhere between ecstasy and terror. His eyes were wide, his lips pressed tight, but the corner of his mouth was slightly curled, as if he were smiling. And behind him, clearly imprinted on the surface of the rock, was the shadow of a hand. A hand resting on his shoulder, pushing him forward. That hand had 5 fingers, but the knuckles were longer than normal, bent at unnatural angles, and the fingernails were sharp as the claws of some wild beast. Kevin Walker never told this story to anyone. He deleted all the photos. He sold his Canon camera. He moved from Boston to Portland, Oregon, 3,000 miles to the west. But his friends say that now, whenever anyone mentions Assinet Ledge, even as a joke, Kevin goes silent. He stares out the window, his eyes vacant, his lips moving as if speaking to someone not in the room. Once, a close friend heard Kevin whisper in his sleep, "She's still there. She always needs more people, and one day she'll come back for me." No one knows if Kevin Walker was talking about the woman on the ledge, and no one wants to find out. 3 months after Kevin Walker left Massachusetts, a young student named Jessica Mendez sat in the library at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, reading about satanic rituals in New England. Her fingers turned yellowed pages, her eyes stopping at a photograph of a massive granite rock shaped like a human face. That was Profile Rock, also known as the Old Man's Face, a site once sacred to the Wampanoag tribe, but later became a gathering place for satanic cults in the 1970s. Police had found disemboweled cattle, 5 pointed stars painted in animal blood, and remnants of burning altars. Locals believed there was an underground bunker beneath the rock, a bunker that appeared on no map. Jessica Mendez did not believe in ghosts. She studied anthropology to understand humans, not to believe in superstitions, but she believed in evidence. And she believed that the rumors about Profile Rock, however strange, were based on some historical truth. So, on a Saturday afternoon, Jessica took a bus from Amherst to Fall River, then hired a taxi to take her to the forest entrance. In her backpack, a digital audio recorder, a thermal camera, a handheld GPS, a flashlight, a notebook, and the courage of someone still too young to know fear. Jessica arrived at Profile Rock at 3 p.m. The sun was still high, but the air around the rock had a sharp, rancid smell, like rotting meat mixed with metal. She wrinkled her nose, opened her notebook, and wrote, "Unusual odor, possibly from decomposing animal carcasses nearby." She looked up at the rock. The face was remarkably clear. A high nose, deep-set eyes, tight-pressed lips. Not a carving, more an accident of nature. But strangely, it looked so alive that Jessica felt as if the face was staring back at her. She shook her head, trying to shake off the feeling. She began taking photos, taking notes, recording the surrounding sounds. Whined through the cracks, distant birdsong, rustling leaves. Time passed. Shadows lengthened. By 5 p.m., the sun had disappeared behind the trees, and the forest began to sink into a dim, half-real, half-illusory light. Jessica looked down at her GPS, and she saw the first strange thing. The screen showed nothing but nonsense numbers. 666, 000, 1111, repeating endlessly. Her coordinates, instead of normal latitude and longitude, were a chaotic string of digits, changing every second. "Technical glitch," she muttered, restarting the device. No change. She powered off, powered on. Still the same numbers. And then she heard crying. Not a woman's cry, not a man's cry. It was the cry of many people at once. Children, teenagers, the elderly, blended into a chorus of pain and despair. The sound came from underground, right beneath her feet. Jessica knelt down, pressing her ear to the ground. Cold, extremely cold. The cold cut through her jeans, through her jacket, seeping into her skin like ice. She turned on her audio recorder, placed it on the ground, and let it record for 10 minutes. Throughout those 10 minutes, she barely dared to breathe. She sat still, clutching her flashlight, staring at Profile Rock. And in the gathering darkness, she saw the face on the rock begin to change. At first, she thought it was the light. Shadows and twilight can create illusions. But then she realized it was not. The face of the ancient Wampanoag chief, with its high nose and deep eyes, was melting. The features blurred, then reformed into a different shape. A new face. The face of a goat. Red, glowing eyes. Long, twisted horns, like two walking sticks. And a mouth, if it could be called a mouth, opening wide to reveal rows of jagged teeth, lipless, smiling. Jessica shot to her feet. She was no longer a skeptical anthropologist. She was just a 22-year-old girl, standing alone in a dark forest, facing something that could not be explained. She ran. She ran through bushes, branches whipping her face, roots tripping her feet. She ran until her lungs burned, until her legs went numb, until she burst out of the forest and saw the distant lights of a farmhouse. She did not look back. She never looked back. The next morning, Jessica sat in her dorm room in Amherst, opened her audio recorder, plugged in her headphones, took a deep breath, and pressed play. The first 10 minutes were what she had recorded: wind, leaves, and those crying sounds rising from underground. But then, the final 10 minutes, the time when she had already fled from Profile Rock and was running toward the farmhouse, the recorder had kept running. And in that recording, there was no sound of running. No gasping breath, no snapping branches. Only a single voice. Her own voice, but fractured, hoarse, as if she had been crying for hours. Come here, come here, come here and stay with us forever. Come here, come here. The words repeated, then blurred into something that was no longer language, no longer human, but something like a moan, a growl from the throat of a cornered animal. Jessica turned off the recorder. She removed the batteries. She put it in a plastic bag, sealed it, and threw it in the dumpster outside the dorm. She never told the full story to anyone. In her graduation thesis, Jessica Mendez wrote only one sentence about Profile Rock. There are places that anthropologists should not study. Profile Rock is one of them. After graduating, Jessica moved to Seattle, Washington, and never mentioned Massachusetts again. But her closest friends say that sometimes, on sleepless nights, Jessica still sits up in the dark, eyes wide, ears turned toward the east wind, as if she can still hear that voice. And perhaps she does. Because once the spirits of Profile Rock have whispered your name, you never escape. No one knew Hockomock Swamp better than Bobby Carson. He was born in Taunton, Massachusetts, just a 15-minute drive from the swamp, and had been hunting in the forest since he was 10 years old. He knew every tree, every trail, every hidden corner where outsiders would get lost in an instant. But on an October night in 2016, Bobby Carson encountered something that 35 years of hunting had never prepared him for. The story began with his dogs. Bobby had a pack of 7 hunting beagles, fierce, loyal dogs trained to track deer and raccoon. That evening, around 9 p.m., the pack suddenly went wild. They barked nonstop, then fell silent just as suddenly, bolted out of their pen and vanished into the darkness of the forest behind his house. Bobby thought they had caught the scent of a deer or a raccoon, some prey large enough to trigger their hunting instinct. He grabbed his rifle, strapped on his headlamp, and walked into the woods. Around 11:15 p.m., Bobby found the first dog. It lay beside an ancient oak tree, next to a pool of black swamp water. At first, Bobby thought it was just resting, but as he got closer, he saw its wide open eyes, its tongue hanging out, its mouth gaping as if screaming in silence. Bobby knelt down and examined the dog. Its tongue had been cut out, Its eyes had been gouged out, and its chest, from the breastbone to the belly, had been split open as if by a surgical scalpel, yet there was no blood. The dog looked like a cloth doll, split open for stuffing, but inside was empty. Bobby swallowed hard. His hand trembled as he raised his rifle, and then he saw the amber eyes. At least 5 pairs of eyes were staring at him from the surrounding bushes, about 2 feet off the ground. They glowed in the darkness like gemstones embedded in the faces of creatures invisible to the naked eye. Bobby shone his flashlight toward those eyes, and he saw them. Pukwudgies. Bobby Carson was not a believer in Native American legends, but he had heard the stories of dwarf-like creatures, 2 feet tall, ash-gray skin, porcupine-like spikes on their backs, faces wrinkled like 200-year-old elders. The Wampanoag said the Pukwudgies were once friends of humans, but after a betrayal, they became enemies. Now, they hunt humans for sport. Bobby thought it was just a fairy tale. But those 5 pairs of amber eyes and those wrinkled, twisted faces smiling at him were no fairy tale. The things that bared their sparse yellow teeth, that rattled the spikes on their backs, that raised 3-fingered hands to point at him, they were real. One Pukwudgie stepped forward. It wore something like a cloak made of rotting hide, and on its head was a hat made from the skull of some bird. It opened its mouth, and in a raspy voice, like stone grinding against stone, it said, "1. You hunt in our land. Now we hunt you." Bobby raised his rifle and pulled the trigger. Nothing happened. He looked down at the gun, and in the beam of his flashlight, he saw the sling had been cut sometime earlier, and the barrel had been bent, miraculously, as if someone had snapped it with their bare hands like a twig. Bobby Carson ran. He ran through the swamp, mud splashing, branches whipping his face, roots tripping him again and again. He heard laughter from every direction, from above, from below, from behind, from ahead. That laughter was not human. It was the laughter of creatures who knew their prey could not escape. Bobby ran for 4 hours. He did not remember where he ran, how many times he fell, how many times thorns and branches cut his flesh. He only remembered that when dawn broke, he collapsed face down on a dirt road about 2 miles from his house, his left hand covered in blood. He looked at his hand. 2 fingers were gone, the ring finger and pinky, severed cleanly as if by a scalpel. No blood, no pain, only a clean cut, as if they had never existed. Bobby Carson was taken to Morton Hospital in Taunton. The doctors said he was in severe shock, psychologically unstable, and might never fully recover. Bobby's neighbors said that after that night, he aged 20 years in a single week. His hair turned white. His eyes became hollow, and he never spoke to anyone again, just sat silently on his porch, staring at the forest with those amber-colored eyes of obsession that never faded. 3 months later, Bobby Carson sold his house in Taunton and moved to Florida. Before he left, he wrote a letter to the local sheriff. A single line, in shaky handwriting. "Don't go into Hockomock after sunset. They are hungry, and they are about to come out." The sheriff put the letter in his desk drawer and never spoke of it to anyone. But one thing everyone knew. From that night on, no resident of Taunton dared set foot in Hockomock Swamp after 8 p.m. And those amber eyes, sometimes on moonless nights, still flicker from within the darkness, waiting for their next prey. Of all the stories about the Freetown forest, none is more haunting or heartbreaking than the story of Mary Lou Aruda. On the 2nd of October 1978, Mary Lou, a 15-year-old girl with golden hair and a bright, flower-like smile, was riding her bicycle home from school in Fall River. It was a short route, only 15 minutes, through quiet residential neighborhoods. She had ridden that route hundreds of times. But that time, she never made it home. 9 days later, Mary Lou's body was found in the Freetown forest. She had been tied to a pine tree with nylon rope, the rope twisted around her neck, and left there, alone, in the darkness, among the silent trees. Her killer, James Cater, took 22 years and 4 trials to be convicted. But the people of Fall River never forgot. They say that the forest where Mary Lou died still echoes with her screams. They say that on windy nights, you can hear the creak of bicycle wheels spinning on empty trails. And they say that if you are foolish enough or reckless enough to go to that tree at midnight, you will see Mary Lou still there, still tied up, still screaming, still waiting to be freed. Ryan Thompson was a bad kid. He was born and raised in Fall River, in a rundown house with an alcoholic father and a mother who left when he was 12. Ryan was afraid of nothing, not of being beaten, not of being arrested, not of death. He loved thrills, destruction, making others afraid. So when a friend told him that no one dared go to the tree where Mary Lou was killed at midnight, Ryan laughed loudly and said, "You kidding? Wait till 2 in the morning. I'll go there, take a selfie, and send it to you, and I'll prove there are no demons out there." On a Saturday night in mid-October, Ryan, along with 2 friends, Derek Sullivan and Marcus Webb, drove his beat-up truck into the forest at 1:45 a.m. They brought 3 cans of beer, 2 flashlights, a Bluetooth speaker for rap music, and an iPhone to capture their cool moment. They laughed, smoked, cursed, and walked down the trail. They found the tree, an old, towering pine with old rope marks carved deep into the bark like a giant scar. At the base of the tree was a small bronze plaque placed by Mary Lou's family, engraved, "Mary Lou Aruda, 1963, 1978, forever in our hearts." Ryan laughed. He set his phone on a rock, set the timer for 10 seconds, then leaned against the tree and waved like a rock star. The phone clicked. Ryan picked it up and looked at the photo. At first, it looked normal. Ryan grinning, beer-glazed eyes sparkling, arm draped around the tree as if hugging a friend. But when Ryan zoomed in on the photo, his smile died. Behind him, about 20 feet away, in the darkness of the trees, was the shadow of a bicycle. A turquoise blue bicycle, a girl's model, with a wicker basket on the front and fake flowers stuck to the frame, identical to the bicycle Mary Lou was riding the day she disappeared. And on the bicycle was the shadow of a little girl. She bowed her head, long golden hair covering her face, 2 small hands gripping the handlebars, feet on the pedals, as if waiting for someone to clear the way. "Just a reflection," Ryan said, but his voice was already shaking. "Cheap camera, flash reflection, that's all." Derek and Marcus exchanged glances. They didn't believe Ryan, but they didn't dare say so. At exactly 2 a.m., all 3 heard a sound, not from the Bluetooth speaker, not from the forest. The sound came from beneath the tree, from where the old rope marks bit into the bark. It was a scream, not an adult scream. It was the scream of a 15-year-old girl, high, shrill, desperate, shattering, like glass falling on stone. "Help! Help me! Please untie the rope! I can't breathe!" Ryan stood frozen. His face went pale. His hand shook so badly, the flashlight nearly fell. Derek and Marcus ran. They didn't say a word to each other, didn't shout, didn't cry out. They just turned and ran, leaving Ryan alone under the tree. 30 minutes later, when Derek and Marcus were sitting in the truck, gasping for breath, they realized Ryan hadn't come back. They waited 10 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour. Ryan didn't appear. Finally, Derek, his heart pounding like a war drum, went back down the trail, flashlight in hand, following Ryan's footprints. Marcus followed behind, clutching a folding knife, the only weapon they had. They found Ryan under the tree. He was sitting on the ground, his back against the pine trunk, exactly where the old rope marks were. His legs stretched out, his hands on his thighs, his eyes wide open, pupils dilated so much they nearly covered his irises. His mouth hung open, as if screaming, but no sound came out. On Ryan's neck, where there was no rope at all, was a dark red mark, imprinted on his skin like the mark of a rope that had been pulled too tight. Ryan Thompson was taken to St. Anne's Hospital in Fall River at 5:30 a.m. The doctor's conclusion: severe psychological shock, loss of communication ability, and signs of a neurological injury never before seen in a young patient. 3 days later, Ryan was transferred to Taunton State Hospital, the same place that had treated many other victims of the Freetown forest before him. Ryan never spoke again. But the nurses in the isolation ward say that every night at exactly 2 a.m., they hear Ryan whisper from his room, "The wheel spins. The wheel spins forever. That little girl is still trying to find her way home, but she can't go home. She needs someone to stay with her." And sometimes, if they stand close enough to Ryan's door, they hear another sound, a sound not coming from Ryan's mouth, but from behind the locked door. The creak of a bicycle wheel. Creak, 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 forever. In the world of supernatural phenomena, there is one mystery that has lasted more than a century and has never been satisfactorily explained: the Brown Mountain Lights. First recorded in 1913, those orange, red, and blue spheres of light appear above Brown Mountain in North Carolina, moving in ways that defy the laws of physics. They can hover motionless for minutes, then suddenly shoot away at impossible speeds. They can vanish, then reappear somewhere else in an instant. In 1922, the United States Geological Survey sent a team of experts to Brown Mountain to investigate. Their conclusion was shocking. Not car lights, not forest fires, not swamp gas, not any known natural phenomenon. They could not explain the Brown Mountain Lights. The Cherokee, the native tribe of that region, have their own legend. They say the lights are the spirits of Native American warriors who died in a fierce battle between the Cherokee and the Catawba. Those warriors could neither ascend to heaven nor descend to earth, so they wander between dimensions, their light a final cry for help sent to the world of the living. But there is another theory, one that mainstream scientists never dare publish, that the Brown Mountain Lights are time portals. Or more precisely, they are tears in the fabric of space-time where dimensions intersect. Dr. Emily Vance was an astrophysicist at Duke University in Durham, North Carolina. She had spent 10 years studying the Brown Mountain Lights. She was not a ghost hunter. She believed in data, in equations, in what could be measured and repeated. And that is precisely why, when she discovered something strange in her data, she could not ignore it. In 2022, Emily placed 12 high-resolution cameras on the summit of Brown Mountain, connected to spectrographs and magnetometers. Each night, the system recorded hundreds of events, but most could be explained by ordinary atmospheric phenomena. But on the night of the 23rd of September 2022, everything changed. Emily was sitting in the control room, staring at her computer screen, when she saw 47 spheres of light appear within just 2 hours. They were not moving chaotically as usual. This time, all of them were moving in the same direction, toward the northeast. Emily opened a map. She drew a straight line from Brown Mountain northeast, through Virginia, through Washington, D.C., through New York. That line led straight to Massachusetts, to the Freetown, Fall River Forest, to Hockomock Swamp. Emily did not believe in coincidence. She arranged her affairs, requested leave from the university, and a week later, she was standing on the muddy ground of Hockomock Swamp at 6 p.m. as the sun began to sink behind the trees. She brought 3 portable spectrographs, a handheld magnetometer, and a digital audio recorder. She had prepared for every scenario, except the one that actually happened. When night fell, Emily saw them. The spheres of light, just like those at Brown Mountain, but larger, brighter, and closer, were rising from the swamp floor, one by one. They were not drifting randomly. They formed a perfect circle, about 50 feet in diameter, about 200 feet from where Emily stood. And at the center of the circle, the air was bending. Emily had seen this in the lab, studying gravitational lensing. But here, in Hockomock Swamp, there was no mass source large enough to bend space like that, unless a portal was opening. She raised her spectrograph. The results appeared on the small screen, and Emily read them 3 times to be sure. These spheres of light emitted no known radiation, not visible light, not infrared, not ultraviolet. They emitted a wavelength never before recorded in any physics database. That wavelength had been recorded only once in history, in 1943, during the Philadelphia experiment, a secret U.S. Navy test that supposedly teleported the USS Eldridge through space and time, causing some sailors to be fused into the ship's hull. And then Emily saw the human shadow. Inside the circle of light, where the air bent like a convex mirror, stood a man. He wore tattered clothing from the late 19th century, a vest, trousers, a felt hat. His skin was gray, his eyes sunken, and his lips moved continuously, as if saying something very important. Emily could not hear him. His voice could not cross the boundary between worlds, but through her thermal camera, she saw his lips form words, one by one, slowly, clearly. "Help us. Close the portal. Before they get out." Emily read the sentence again and again. Cold sweat ran down her spine. Before they get out. Who were they? Had. She looked back at the circle of light. Just then, the spheres began to change color, from orange to red, from red to black. And in that moment, between 2 spheres, Emily saw a pair of eyes. Eyes with no whites, no pupils, just 2 bottomless black voids, deep as abysses. And beneath those eyes, a mouth, if it could be called a mouth, was opening. A mouth with no lips, no teeth, but shaped into a smile. Emily Vance, the astrophysicist who believed nothing that could not be proven by mathematics, ran. She ran until her lungs burned, until her legs went numb, until she burst out of the forest and saw the headlights of her rental car parked by the road. She did not look back. She never looked back. Emily Vance resigned from Duke University. She abandoned her research. She sold her house in Durham, cut off contact with most of her friends, and moved to a small town in Maine, a place with no forests, no swamps, no darkness. But before she locked her journal in a safe, Emily wrote one last line, scrawled hastily, as if trying to escape her own thoughts. The brown mountain lights are not ghosts. They are real people, people trapped between dimensions, calling out for us to save them. But last night, inside that circle of light, I saw not only humans, I saw something else. A pair of black eyes, a mouth without lips. It is learning to speak. It is learning to call our names. And one day it will call, and we will answer. 5 stories, 5 people, 5 different fates, but all ending with the same unanswered question. What is the Freetown Fall River Forest, Hockomock Swamp, really? Is it where the spirits of the Wampanoag still wander after 300 years? Is it where the cursed wampum belt is hidden, the object that can control the souls of an entire land? Is it where satanic cults held their rituals under the full moon? Or is it a portal connecting our world to another, where creatures older than time itself are waiting? Kevin Walker, the photographer from Boston, has aged before his time. He lives in Oregon, but his eyes always look east. Jessica Mendez, the young anthropologist, has left her profession. She works in a coffee shop in Seattle, and she never goes out after dark. Bobby Carson, the old hunter from Taunton, died in 2019. He was found in his armchair in that Florida rental room, eyes wide open, hands on his thighs, and on his face was a strange smile, as if he had finally seen what he had always been searching for. Ryan Thompson is still in Taunton State Hospital. He does not speak, does not write, does not communicate with anyone. But the nurses say that whenever the wind blows from the forest, Ryan cries, a silent cry, only tears streaming down his pale face. And Dr. Emily Vance, the astrophysicist who once conquered the highest peaks of knowledge, now lives in a wooden house in Maine with no internet, no phone, no connection to the outside world. She says she doesn't need to know anything else. She already knows too much. Hockomock Swamp is still there. The spirits have not rested, and the portal is still open. From deep within the darkness, from among the ancient oak trees, from beneath the black mud of the swamp, a whisper drifts out. Very faint, very distant, but very clear. Come here, we are waiting. The final question for you, the one listening to these words: do you dare enter that forest?